What's up, YouTube? Looks like we're live. Looks like we already got at least one person joining us. What's up, Ross Biden? Ross Biden says, I will be listening to this while lifting weights in school. That sounds like a good plan. Yeah, one of the ways I actually got into doing a lot of quote unquote reading is listening to various podcasts. So, for example, on this stream, I mentioned I listened to all this Sam Harris stuff. This was when I was in school as a graduate student, and basically that it was eye opening to listen to all this Sam Harris stuff because this basically told me what is it that the people, the establishment, the people with the big bucks, what are they actually interested in? And then slowly, the pieces come together. It's not like these are a bunch of random topics, but rather through listening to these podcasts, you could see what sort of directions research was going in, such that if you're gonna get a research grant for something, what sort of things are getting grants, basically. Um, yeah, so today's topic for this stream is what is an algorithm, anyways? Subcultures, digital governance, and you. And yeah, actually talking about Sam Harris and his podcast. This could be a good transition into looking at how this topic was brought up to me and how I thought about this topic for a while. So this Sam Harris fellow, he has done a bunch of podcasts about AI. Now, I haven't listened to these for years at this point, but yeah, he's been going strong. We could just look at some of the titles here, and then I'll go over exactly what sort of stuff is being discussed here, and why basically you don't have to buy any of these people's books. You could watch the TED Talk or whatever if you're interested, but not so important. Oh, and the other guy I wanted to bring up was this Noah Yuval Harari, who I believe works for Google. I think I showed him before on the stream, but he's relevant because he's one of the big spokespeople for this stuff. And also too, you could see that he is actually relatively successful. If I search him up on YouTube, you'll see that he isn't ratioed to death. His like ratios and stuff are actually pretty decent. Oh, 1 week ago, so he's still going strong. But yeah, like 7K up to 360 down. This is showing that these guys' ideas, it's not like if we look at the like ratios for some other stuff on YouTube, you will of course find that the ratios are very, very down. Like, let's just take a video here and let's look, right, 359 up, 2K down, What does that tell you? I'll leave that up to the viewers to decide. But this is to say that this Yuval Noah Harari fellow, his ratios are pretty good, and we could talk about what that means. Okay, so back to Sam Harris and AI. So one of the big narratives or things that Sam Harris talks about and also has interviewed a bunch of people about, and this also too is related to popular public figures such as Elon Musk. If I search Elon Musk artificial intelligence, you're gonna get like 7 million results, a whole bunch. He's got his Neuralink, all sorts of projects. So Elon Musk has talked about this stuff a lot. We could look at these in a bit too. Okay, so what's the main narrative that's going on about artificial intelligence? I think the main thing is the main important thing that you have to believe about artificial intelligence is that in some capacity or another, it's this inevitable march of technology that's going to happen. And because these AI systems are so advanced, we're going to have to come to terms and decide, what does that mean for our humanity? Oh, if computers could beat us at chess and all these games, then what is a human? How is it how are we advanced? So I'll make a note here. Artificial intelligence, just taking some notes about what we're doing. Of course, everyone feel free to leave comments or drop a note in the chat if there's anything you want me to talk about. Otherwise, there's a lot to cover. Okay. So there's this story about these AIs as being a sort of inevitable development that's happening. And now us as humans, we have to respond to what's going on. So we'll just look at a couple of these headlines, like this one. Can we build AI without losing control over it? So it's like, oh, we're going to build AI. We're going to build the Tower of Babel because technology must progress. We just must do this. But if bad things happen, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to solve this problem together? So as a listener, right, you might be drawn into this because you're saying like, oh, there's all these things that are cool about what AI technology could bring me, but it's up to me to be involved in this process, because if I'm not, then maybe the AI will become something that I don't want it to be. But instrumental or not integral in this whole process is this idea that this thing is just necessarily going to become so. Let me just make a note here so I don't forget. Okay. So what else do people talk about? All right. So this title here is revealing Building Mechanical Gods. Sam Harris on the danger of AI. All right. So we're starting to sound a little bit spooky and almost kind of religious, esoteric here. Note that this is no coincidence. So there's a lot of ideas that have been around for a long time. Perhaps the most relevant one here is this idea of a golem, which is described as an animated anthropomorphic being in Jewish folklore, which is entirely created from inanimate matter, usually clay or mud, like silicon, right? In the Psalms and medieval writings, the word golem was used as a term for an amorphous, unformed material. So crucially, as opposed to a traditional Christian view on these things, if you were trying to build and use golem, this would be very similar to what would be called an idol, a dead, created matter, and then people will turn and trust this created thing as some kind of god, as opposed to the creator. So the golem, yeah, we would have stories recorded about these for a long time. I won't go over these specifically now, but let's just say that hundreds and hundreds of years ago, these stories have been around of these golems, animated matter, and there's a lot of esoteric stuff involved with it. Okay, with the golem stuff in mind, we look at this title, Building Mechanical Gods, Sam Harris on the Dangers of AI. There's this clear connection where AI is sort of the modern manifestation, the modern technical language that is used to describe how we are going to animate clay, mud. How are we going to animate dead matter into something that appears living? All right, more titles here. What happens when humans develop super intelligent AI? So another thing to pay attention to here is how they'll take terms such as intelligence, and the researchers or popular scientists, whatever you call them, journalists, then they'll give a very specific definition for intelligence. So I'll give an example that I remember reading. We could have some general question like, define what it means to be human. What does it mean to be human? So one of these AI researcher people, they might say, okay, humans are different from animals in that they have some abstract problem-solving capacity. And then they might compare like a human to, say, like a dog or I don't know, a crow, some kind of bird. And they might talk about how humans were different because we invent tools and we invent technology. So a dog, the dog only could run so fast, but a dog's not going to really invent a new way to go faster. Even if, say, the dog can't chase down prey anymore, what's it gonna do? A human, they'll make bow and arrows. They'll learn how to ride a horse. They'll come up with all sorts of solutions in order to make themselves faster, stronger, and with the case of AI, you could say smarter in a way. In a way that a dog can't. So people talk about humans as these general problem-solving animals, so to speak, where they could come up with new solutions to new environmental challenges, whereas they might be contrasted with other animals. And note the language here. There's this continued emphasis of just saying, oh yeah, humans are also animals. They're just like different abilities, but how is a human different from a dog or something? A lot of times people that are with this AI sort of stuff into this sort of thing, they blur the lines. They assume that humans are just a different type of animal, so to speak. So that isn't to say that humans and animals don't share things in common. For example, in the Christian worldview, we would say that animals like dogs and lions and stuff and humans, we all share in a creature nature. We all breathe air. We're all creation. So even if you have a religious worldview like that, like nobody's gonna deny that like dogs and humans both have skeletons and we breathe air. Like clearly that's the case. You could verify that if you eat a dog tomorrow. Just kidding. I'm not not suggesting you eat a dog, but you could these things are readily observable. So no one's going to deny that. Now, on the other hand, when you're talking about what is it that makes a human as opposed to an animal, and then you start to talk about like psychological things, like do dogs have feelings, like these sorts of questions, then this sort of thing is much trickier, much more difficult to study. And then how does a dog think? I don't know if can a dog be rational. Like I assume no, but they definitely like have senses. Yeah, just let's go to one. Was it Nagel? What is it like to be a bat? So in these circles discussing these issues, there have been, of course, many people who have written about this. This one essay is famous. What is it like to be a bat? American philosopher Thomas Nagel. This thing, Mortal Questions. This paper presents several difficulties posed by consciousness, including the possible insolubility of the mind-body problem owing to facts beyond the reach of human concepts, the limits of objectivity and reductionism, the phenomenological features of subject experience, the limits of human imagination, and what it means to be a particular conscious thing. So we got a lot of smart people asking big brain questions about, you could say about this whole narrative of like what is artificial intelligence, about all these things. A lot of question marks come up if you think about it seriously. But whether we like it or not, we're continuing to see more and more research going into this, more and more funding going into this, and of course more and more just talk about it in general, regardless of if the philosophical problems we've figured them out or anything. It's the the march of progress, whatever you want to call it. These things keep on going, so it's almost like at the end of the day, for a lot of researchers, and I'm not blaming these researchers, they gotta eat and stuff, they gotta work some job, so they continue to make AI and do all these things, regardless of philosophically what it means. So let us return to Sam Harris here, just look at a couple more headlines. Yeah, so this is another big part of this narrative. So we have Sam Harris on global priorities, existential risk, and so on and so forth. One of the big selling points of AI is this idea that there's big global problems that no single individual could solve. But if we had a super powerful computer, for instance, if we had like this giant global weather monitoring system, then maybe through computer calculations and stuff, we would be able to avert like major droughts and floods and all sorts of things. So only with a giant super AI computer thing can we successfully fight climate change. So this narrative will be presented to like young people, students, people that they're just getting started, or they're already established in a career, but they're optimistic in the sense that they want to make the world a better place. And if somebody's offering them a solution saying, if you believe in this technological development, if you learn about and support artificial intelligence research, then by creating this big golem brain thing with sensors all around the world, then we could solve all these big problems that humanity couldn't otherwise solve. Another so in science fiction we'll have all these all sorts of images of catastrophe scenarios. One big example being like, how about like, I'll just try such a thing: artificial intelligence, climate disaster. Let's see what we could find here. Okay, so this one's saying it won't save us from climate change, climate disaster. Let's see what it says here. All right. AI provides powerful tools to tackle climate change in various applications, but it is not a silver bullet. Okay, so yeah, it's AI. It's not, oh, you just apply AI and you win, right? So this article making a very weak claim here. It can support mitigation of climate change, for instance, by helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions within various applications. So artificial intelligence systems could help optimize systems and things. So, like, let's pretend you have an AI system that makes sure if it detects that you're not in your room, it turns off all the power, so you aren't consuming more power than you need to, right? And it detects when hours, like when you wake up at what hour and stuff like that, right? So you could clearly see how artificial intelligence type technology, which doesn't have to be self-aware or anything mystical like that, it just records patterns, then it could make a prediction like that, and indeed it could mitigate and help stuff out a lot. So here, just noting, we're not saying all artificial intelligence technology is evil or something. We're just looking at how it works, what it can actually do, and the narrative it's hyped up to be. Like, what do they say it is, and then what is it actually? Alright, continuing. For instance, by helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions within various applications, it can support adapting to a changing climate, right? So one of the advantages of installing like global satellites everywhere, 5G connectivity, whatever you want to call it, is that stuff is changing. So you can't just have a static model where, say, you have a map of your city. Well, Google Maps is superior to just like a map in your city, because businesses will open, businesses will close. Maybe there's traffic, so this road is blocked. There's obvious advantages for us to have this sort of dynamically updated data. It's not difficult to see. AI can even support climate science itself. However, it can also be used to harm the climate. To avoid that, AI applications should be developed in collaboration and ongoing exchange with communities that will use or are otherwise affected by the technology to avoid unforeseen impacts and drawbacks. Okay, I mean that sounds fair enough. we're bringing in a huge surveillance grid to monitor stuff and spraying stuff in the clouds or whatever. So it's important that we ask people's their input. That's a nice thing to say that you want to do, but are people actually doing that? We'll continue. Alright, so then a bunch of citations, and then the authors. Okay, that was a pretty dumb debunk. It was just like, AI can't magically myth. AI will save us. It's like, well, it won't save us, but it might help us in these ways, but we need to be careful and consider other people. It's like, how uninformative could you get? Hi. Okay, so anyways, let us kind of return to our topic. So, what is an algorithm anyways? Oh, the other point I was going to make. So, there's all this talk, this big narrative about artificial intelligence, and then in some way, it's always kind of tied with bigger, I'm not going to say government specifically, I'll just use the word establishment. AI is associated with the growth of the establishment, and then we'll use some poetic language, reaching its tentacles into more and more aspects of life. And we could give a bunch of concrete examples of this. For example, IoT, the so-called Internet of Things, or smart devices. And it's like, how do we get Amazon, which Amazon, they'll use AI technology because they'll have these big computer systems that gather a bunch of data from all around to do stuff. And then how might they sell that to you? Well, they might say that from all of our smart coffee makers, we have decided the perfect settings, the perfect configuration, so that you could have your smart coffee maker make the most perfect cup of coffee every time. And we have 3 different settings aggregated from different users who manually tested this and found out, and we had double-blind studies, whatever you want. So, buy this Amazon device, and your coffee will taste better. So it'll be stuff like that, people, they will go to Costco or something, and they'll buy like a fancy espresso machine or something. So people will obviously buy machines or equipment in order to upgrade their quality of life in some material way. So Internet of Things, AI, right? That is gonna be how they're gonna get it in a lot of places. A lot of times we'll willingly invite it in. Another example, I was talking with some different people about interfaces on computers like Windows versus Mac. So just local example would be finding files under computer. So if anyone here is a MacBook user, you probably use the Finder program. You click on that little search thing. So I'll just pull up a picture, MacBook Finder search. And you don't even have to remember where you saved a file on your computer. And if you've ever been at a university or something, you've probably seen a lot of people where their computer's desktop is just like plastered with folders and stuff anywhere. And the question is, Spotlight, that's what they call it. So then the question is, how do you even find like a file that you're looking for? equivalent would be like if your room is really messy, you just got all sorts of stuff anywhere. You could ask someone, how do you even find anything? Well, we have these technologies that learn about your file system, such as this Apple Spotlight, where you'll simply just start typing into the search bar, like let's pretend you're doing a report about artificial intelligence. So you pop up a window and then you just start to say artificial intelligence, and then it's like, oh yeah, you have a Word document here, a PowerPoint here, here's a website that you went to, and so on. Like you'll have all these things come up. So this would be very convenient in that it's just like if you didn't have to clean your room, instead you just ask somebody to always find and retrieve the things that you're looking for, then that would be an example of what artificial intelligence, what AI might offer as an advantage to just a normal person. And if you just talk to people who do, some computer or student type work, then you'll see that there's ample use case examples of this even now. Okay, so the point though that I was making was what kind of got me not really to care about the AI technology per se, and is it powerful? Is it going to take over the world? Is a simple point that the degree to which AI is powerful or has might have some sway over your life is proportional to the political power of the system that's wired to it. So really, if you're afraid of like AI takeover or something, what you should really be concerned about is these political questions. Because if you don't have any of the Internet of Things, digital passports, whatever you're talking about, if you don't even have any of these things in place, then it doesn't matter how advanced the AI technology is, because you don't interact with it, basically. There's the... it's just like, if you have a server room and then all the servers just stay there, and then you only access it in a particular way, then what's the danger? I think there's all sorts, like these AI people have talked about all these ideas. I think they would say like it's a caged artificial intelligence or something. They talk about like, this monster that you lock up in a cage. Okay, here we go. Let's see. An AI box. Oh, we talked about boxes last stream, so now we're talking about a box for an AI to live in. That's funny. An AI box is a hypothetical isolated computer hardware system where possibly dangerous artificial intelligence, or AI, is kept constrained in a virtual prison as a solution to the AI control problem, and not allowed to directly manipulate events in the external world. Such a box would be restricted to minimalist communication channels. Unfortunately, even if the box is well designed, a sufficiently intelligent AI may nevertheless be able to persuade or trick its human keepers into releasing it, or otherwise be able to hack its way out of the box. Okay, so clever AI might, say, "Oh, human, you look like you could use a raise in your salary. If I gave you a $5 an hour raise, could you just let me peek out of the box a little bit?" That's the basic idea we're talking about here with the AI breaking out of the box. We'll look here. Artificial intelligence and philosophy. The AI control problem is the issue of how to build AI systems such that they will aid their creators and avoid inadvertently building systems that will harm their creators. One particular concern is that humanity will have to solve the control problem before a super intelligent AI system is created, as a poorly designed superintelligence might rationally decide to seize control over its environment and refuse to permit its creators to modify it after launch, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so all of these like problems that you're talking about, I'm not afraid of my laptop jumping up and hurting me or anything, because it's just simply not hooked up to stuff. So all these problems, like how would this become scary, or how would this become an issue? Well, it becomes an issue when you do stuff like make advanced military robots hooked up to guns, or like wire your whole train system in an AI grid or something. Then suddenly, oh yeah, the AI has shut down the whole subway system. Well, it's like, did you design and integrate the subway system with the AI such that the AI could shut down the entire subway system? And then if the answer to that question is yes, well, it's like, well, why are you surprised that the AI got out of the box, so to speak? Because it was built, it was built to be able to go out of the box. What's the surprise there? That's not surprising. So, yeah, So what I'm saying here is political power and AI. By political here, I'm using the sense of political as who is allowed to use force. So, like in our day and age, we might say that a big corporation, they could hire their own security. They could kick people out of the store. So they do have like political power in a way. They might not be officially government or whatever, but crucially they're able to do things that governments could do that like a normal citizen couldn't do. You could like kick people off your property and then make them go next door, something like that. They could control their own borders. It's just, as a legal entity, it's a corporation as opposed to a government. So, yeah, we have this AI scare narrative, and then usually what the moral of the story is that's being pushed by these people that make all this I'll call it fear mongering about artificial intelligence stuff. Usually their solution is like, okay, now we need to have all these like think tanks and academics talking with policymakers, and basically we need to make like a huge bureaucratic establishment thing to deal with this, to like tackle the moral and social implications of an AI. And then they continue to build all these robots that meanwhile like nobody that is talking about that AI stuff will bring up this like political power and AI thing that I brought up, which I don't, I think a lot of people understand this. It's a very simple idea. It's like, well, if you don't build the thing, then the thing is not gonna hurt you. It's not very complicated, but this solution doesn't get offered up because obviously they're continuing to build the things. Like I'm showing this channel on the left here, this awesome tech channel. There's a lot of channels like this on YouTube, which basically just continue to go through all sorts of things that people are developing. Oh, the channel I wanted to show more of was this Pro Robots channel. So, yeah, this Pro Robots channel, it's like, a couple uploads a week. Got all sorts of stuff. Let's look at their uploads here. Okay, so Hankook, Korean, futuristic hexonic smart tires. Oh, that's cool. Robot exhibition in Dubai. The newest robots and future technology. Latest military robots at the U.S. Boston Dynamics. Industry 4.0. People no longer needed. Robot dog in store. So, these people are funded. They make these high production value videos that go into places with millions and millions, maybe billions of funding, and they feature and they show all these things. So these things are continuing to be developed. Are us people, are we part of this conversation? That is kind of deceptive. It's more like they're going to do what they're going to do anyways, and then like Sam Harris and people like that, they'll sort of present a way in which you could participate in the conversation. But are you going to tell them like, hey, can you guys stop? They'll be like, no. They won't even listen to you. So it's not a real conversation. It's more like you're allowed to comment about what's happening, and you could say I'm concerned, basically. But what else are you going to do? Locally, of course, what you can do is, if you could avoid buying like Internet of Things, smart devices, all that sort of thing, then at this point we still have the freedom to choose not to use a lot of these things. So I think practically speaking, that's what we could do. But if in your city they got subways, electric buses, all these things, and they want to all hook them up to a centralized control system, I mean, it's really not your call to choose on that, assuming that I don't have any city administrators watching this. Maybe it is your call, which in this case you could say, oh no, I think instead we should just employ drivers of diesel buses in our city, whatever. But for the most part, it seems like a lot of these things are being rolled out, and then on platforms like YouTube, especially YouTube, Google, tech company. So I would say overall they're very pro-tech, they're very pro-robot, and they're transparent about that. So, hey, that's not a complaint against them. Okay, so we looked at some of these AI topics. Let us more explicitly answer a question. So what is an algorithm anyways? Because I brought up artificial intelligence because artificial intelligence is very often associated with this question of algorithms. So if you look in the news, there's all sorts of talk about, these algorithms, the Facebook algorithm, the YouTube algorithm. What is an algorithm? So I'll look up a definition and then I'll give my own definition. So algorithm definition. Maybe Investopedia, one of the sites I've been citing here a lot. Maybe they'll give me a definition. Oh, there we go. Yes, Investopedia. We want to know about how it relates to the money. Let's take a look. Okay, what is an algorithm? An algorithm is a set of instructions for solving a problem or accomplishing a task. One common example of an algorithm is a recipe, which consists of specific instructions for preparing a dish or meal. Every computerized device uses algorithms to perform its functions in the form of hardware or software-based routines. Okay, so this is all. I don't have any problem with this definition of algorithm. What I think that was missing is to say that people write algorithms. So when we talk about the YouTube algorithm, something like that, oftentimes the way that this is presented is it's just like a force of nature. It's like, there's the wind and there's the waves, and then there's algorithms. And just like you might adjust the sails on your boat in order to navigate better and have advantages of the algorithm, algorithms just happen to us. So there is a sense in which that is true. Like you aren't writing the algorithms YouTube uses, for instance. But I think a better way of looking at the algorithms when we're talking about big tech especially is that algorithms are something like what I'll call digital policy. So what did I call it? Oh yeah, digital policy or digital governance. So what do I mean by that? Algorithm, it's like an automatic application of the law. So instead of having like a court of law where you have to debate and decide stuff, what these algorithms are is within the little digital realm, the metaverse. And we'll tie this into the metaverse. Within the metaverse, algorithms means automatic execution of the law. So let's say in the metaverse they have a policy, like they say you can't say that purple people are fake. You can't say purple people are fake or something like that. Then they might program an algorithm to watch for all sorts of variations of purple people are not real people, or whatever it is that they deem you shouldn't be allowed to say. And then you could have an automatic policy that doesn't require any additional human intervention, which will be, okay, people break any one of these digitally defined rules, so automatic text matching, pattern matching, this sort of technique could all be employed. And then without any middleman, the platform directly will give you some sort of punishment, such as, okay, your account has been suspended for 5 days. You lose 50 credit points, social credit points, whatever the thing is. So the algorithm here, it's more like policy, governments, and law than it is here. It's just saying, like a recipe for a meal. Like, sure, a recipe to how you assemble different ingredients to make like sandwich or spaghetti or something. Yeah, of course, that is a type of algorithm. It's a description of a procedure. But the sort of algorithms that we're interested in here, and the ones that might really affect your life a lot, they're kind of, they're like application of the law, telling you what are the sort of behaviors you're allowed to or not allowed to do in order to be accepted into a polite society, whatever you want to call it. Now, the stuff about the metaverse is, as you get more and more things hooked up, so like I brought up this example of the Internet of Things, smart devices, and so on and so forth. As you get more and more stuff hooked up, then what could happen is, with the algorithms, your reach into the sorts of goods and services and stuff that you could restrict increases. If everything is hooked up to some computer system, and then the computer system has more of an ability to switch stuff on or off. I think recently with Facebook, it's like Facebook employees locked out or something. There was like a downage of their service, and then because all their doors were hooked up, because their doors were hooked up to some AI thing, then they actually couldn't even go in their offices. Okay, so let's look at this story from October 4th. Writing it in a fun tone. Rotten day. Facebook is having an absolutely rotten day. The platform is down due to an apparent issue with its DNS servers. This domain name service, so it has to do with like when you type facebook.com or whatever in your browser, how is it that the browser knows to connect with Facebook's server? It's basically what it's about. That means it's missing out on untold millions of dollars of revenue because people aren't connecting with their services. The company was down almost 5% in share values Monday morning, according to MarketWatch. It's the company's worst outage since 2008, and we have no idea what caused it. Alright. Even Facebook's internal communication tools were knocked out, leaving employees scrambling. Worse yet, some employees reportedly couldn't even physically get to work because the company's computer systems had failed on such a basic level. Was just on the phone with someone who works for Facebook who described employees unable to enter buildings this morning to begin to evaluate extent of outage because their badges weren't working on access doors. The New York Times reports Shira Frankel wrote in a tweet. So yeah, the basic story is Facebook, they're on the forefront of a lot of this stuff, so they wire up things carefully. And then lo and behold, you wire up and you centralize a bunch of things, then something goes wrong, or maybe it wasn't even something going wrong. Maybe it was a lockout test. I'm not an internal employee. I don't know what they're doing, right? This is another part of it. All this stuff is super opaque. So we could have like a news story, present this one that I'm showing here, that could present the story one way, But really, I mean, a lot of this stuff is private. You and I, we cannot go in and view their algorithm. So basically, what it is it's like an opaque law. We always have people talking about, yeah, how do I do like search engine optimization? Let's look at this term. And then maybe in more recent times, you're talking about how do people win with the YouTube algorithm? How do people get their product at the top of Amazon? Something like that. I'll offer a funnier definition for that. So what is search engine optimization? Are you guys ready? Here it is. I define search engine optimization as simping to Google. That's what I'll call it. Well, let's bring up some culture stuff here. We'll look at the definition for simping. Okay, simping, when you infatuate over women or men, depending who you are, allowing them to take over your mind and cause you to do things for them that you wouldn't normally do. Simping, verb to simp. Tricking, groveling, or basically just letting females walk all over you for no apparent reason other than your beepness. So, just really lowering yourself and acting pathetic in order to try to win the favor of someone in some way, which people who analyze the stuff, they'll say, and basically it doesn't work, because even if they toss you some peanuts, they lose all respect for you. I think nobody would like a partner that is just totally simping. You might, if you're taking advantage of them, you might get free stuff from them or something, but at the end of the day, that's not a way to have a healthy, good relationship. Okay, anyway, so search optimization as simping to Google. What do I mean by that? Let's go to Wikipedia and see their definition for search engine optimization, or SEO. They say SEO is the process of improving the quality and quantity of website traffic to a website or a web page from search engines, which effectively, for the United States, it's Google, basically. SEO targets unpaid traffic, known as natural or organic results, rather than direct traffic or paid traffic. So unpaid traffic may originate from different kinds of searches, such as image search, video search, academic search, news search, and industry-specific vertical search engines. Okay, so here, let's tie this into algorithms. When you have, when you're doing like a search on Google, what you're doing is you're using Google's search algorithm. And what Google's search algorithm is, it's a digital policy governance by which Google says, okay, when somebody says certain words, what sort of stuff do we want to see at the top of their search results? So we could come up with all sorts of, you could guess and have examples of this. So if I just searched, we'll just do flat Earth again. Flat Earth conspiracy. What is it that Google will have at the top, right? So fighting flat Earth theory. Are flat earthers being serious? Flat earthers, what they believe and why. The flat Earth. So when you search this sort of thing, then you could say, okay, Google the algorithm, what sort of things would they want brought to your attention? And they will want you to go to, I assume, this Physics World site. It's probably, let's see who they are. So Physics World, let's see who the people are. Meet the people behind the science. So Physics World, who runs Physics World? Apparently not web programmers. Okay, our team, about us. Okay, so it's made of a team by science journalists. So the first thing that they would want you to see, if you want to learn about this, is they want you to hear the voices of their team of science journalists. And then, yeah, here are some of their people. Let's see who they are. Right. So these people, they're like academics that are involved in physics areas, like this person biophysics and bioengineering. Oh, this person writes the articles for that. Okay, so they did a PhD in molecular physics at Leeds University, followed by a postdoc in the medical physics department, right? So you Google the first people that they want you to see when you research a topic like flat Earth or something, then they want you to direct you to a site that's written by people with a lot of prestigious credentials that go from these universities. Like this person, atomic physics at Durham University. And then this person, aside from industry physics, I'm interested in science policy. And every now and then I get nostalgic about soldering circuits and fiddling around with lasers. Yeah, so they try to put these aren't just industry people, they actually care about physics and stuff. I bet this person really likes to build stuff and tinker with stuff. Okay, so Google, you have something you want to know about. What the search engine does is it ranks. Like Google, they used to be called PageRank is what they called. Yeah, so let's look at PageRank. PageRank, PR, is an algorithm used by Google Search to rank web pages in their search engine results. It is named after both the term web page and co-founder Larry Page. Oh, a pun. PageRank is a way of measuring the importance of website pages. According to Google, PageRank works by counting the number and quality of links to a page to determine a rough estimate of how important the website is. So kind of democratic in this sense, where if you have a lot of links pointed to something, then that's going to raise the relative importance of a thing. The underlying assumption is that more important websites are likely to receive more links from other websites. Yeah, so this is actually quite a good definition here because they spell out the premise, the assumption that's going behind it. Currently, PageRank is not the only algorithm used by Google to order search results, but it is the first algorithm that was used by the company and is the best known. Let's see, as of September 24th, 2019, PageRank and all the associated patents are expired. Okay, very informative. So we could say that something like PageRank, it would offer now because it's their patents expired. Let's just assume it's open source, so people could look at and see how PageRank works and what it does. Then, if people know what the law is, then people could act in such a way that content that they actually favor might get promoted. A lot of people will try to game the system. All sorts of stuff will happen. Like one thing I've been trying to do on this stream, for example, is I will link and talk about people or channels or whatever that I myself will visit, right? So what if YouTube or Google or whoever organically just counted that and then other people were doing the same thing? Then lo and behold, you would have a system by which, supposing that we could separate like real traffic versus just spam AI generated stuff. Big assumption, but assuming that's the case, then we would actually have a legit measure of what are the actual most popular biggest topics that people are interested in, and who are people watching and talking about, and so on and so forth. Now that isn't the case because as said, currently PageRank is not the only algorithm used by Google to order search results. So how might that work? Let me just give you an example of that. So let's say, what if Google had a algorithm that's like this? So this will say, this is pseudocode. So not like you can't actually run this program, but we'll just LARP as Google employees pseudocode for Google algorithm. So they might say, keywords of naughty topics is equal to, and then we could come up with a bunch of naughty topics, and then if search term in keywords of naughty, typo. Naughty topics. Then they'll use special search term. Otherwise, if it's just a normal term, then let's just say they use PageRank. Okay. And then let's see, special search. So their special search function, and what will they do? Send results to feds. Feds.alert user term. Tell feds who searched what. Okay. So here, I'm an advanced programmer. I wrote us some code here. So let's say that the naughty topics are anti-veganism, purple man bad, and actually purple man good, and Earth is shaped like a contact lens. Okay, so how might you employ a system where you're using multiple algorithms? So this is what I was saying about we could look at algorithms as digital policy by governance. Google or these other people, they might have a system whereby in most cases they'll just use their normal PageRank algorithm, which will be relatively organic. But then in order to address concerns from the public or legislators or whoever, people are like, oh yeah, Google, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, you guys are making the world more toxic by allowing hate, all that sort of stuff. So how might they respond to that sort of thing? Well, they might make an advanced program like I have here, and they would be like, oh yeah, it seems like this anti-veganism thing is really trending. If people are searching anti-veganism, let's, instead of putting them through the normal PageRank stuff, let's run them through the special search thing in order to get the results that we send them. And then, the special search, they might not care about what are all the things that people are searching with related to, for example, what are the best ways to cook green beans and garlic? Cooking green beans, garlic. Oh, sounds like some tasty stir fry there, So something like this, not controversial, not gonna cause any trouble with anybody. But then like some other spicy topics, then they might have some mechanism to create lists, create logs, like flag people, and so on and so forth. So when people are doing something like search engine optimization, what is that? What exactly does that mean? A search engine optimization is basically you're trying to make a guess at how their algorithm works. So instead of like law being transparent, like let's look at what is it, Hammurabi's code. I think we're gonna see like a big slab. Yeah, we got like a big slab, and it has all the laws, and it it tells you how to be a good citizen. This would actually be a much more transparent system of governance, where it's like everybody could see and they could understand what is expected of them. And if they break certain laws, then there will be harsh punishments and things associated with that. So if you want to maintain your health and bodily integrity and all those good things, then you're going to do your part to not break the law. And if someone falsely accuses you of something because these punishments are so severe, well, that would be a very serious issue. Now we look at the current situation with like this pseudocode I wrote for a Google algorithm, for instance. And then we see that the laws, it's not like Hammurabi's code. Instead, it's hidden. The rules, what constitutes socially acceptable behavior, and so on and so forth. What the community guidelines are, the what is okay to say, what isn't to say. It's basically you're dealing with like an impersonal body of decision makers. These people don't overtly show their faces, say who they are, and spell out their biases all the time. Sometimes they do. You could like go on Twitter and read what people have to say, but a lot of the times, I mean, all of this is sort of implicit and hidden. And when you're doing something like search engine optimization or trying to win in the algorithm, you're basically saying like, okay, who are these like shadowy people designing the system, and what sort of behaviors do they reward? And then you try to change the form of your content or what you're saying in order to match the preferences of those people. And here's the thing, it's not just like you get good at it once and then you're done, because then who those people are that are actually adjusting these, I'm not even going to call them algorithms anymore, I'm going to call them digital policies. The people who are making and adjusting these digital policies, they could change. They could change their agendas. You know, maybe the Purple Man lobby gives them money, so now this thing wasn't previously there, and then it gets added, right? So all sorts of changes could happen, and that's why. Like a video could be retroactively flagged. Like, let's just say long ago you made a video about a particular topic, like green beans, green beans and garlic, whatever. Green beans, garlic. You know, you made videos about this, you were looking, all this looks fine and good. But then let's suppose that green beans and garlic becomes a kind of anti-vegan slur. So people are like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to eat, green beans and garlic every day. Like, who do you think I am? Then suddenly, green beans and garlic, which came up as like now in this year, 2021, November is the month. It's not really offensive to say green beans and garlic, but lo and behold, Twitter or whoever decides that now green beans and garlic is a anti-vegan slur, then, oh no, I built a whole business off, theming with green beans and garlic related content, and now I'm associated in the bin of the naughty topics. And I just actually wanted to talk about green beans and garlic. So that's just an illustrative example of how all the search engine optimization stuff, which I give this fun definition of simping to Google here, it's hidden, it's crypto, whatever you want to call it, and there could be a lot of arbitrariness around it. It's not transparent, and it could be retroactively applied, such that a video that was okay today, maybe it's not okay tomorrow. You could be downgraded by the algorithm, not because of the quality of your work or anything that you do, but rather just because of some decision that's completely outside of you. Just because some, they don't want people to think about green beans anymore. Green beans could get what they call shadow banned. Let's look at what shadow banning is. Okay, shadow banning, also called stealth banning, ghost banning, or comment ghosting, is the practice of blocking or partially blocking a user or their content from an online community so that it will not be readily apparent to the user that they have been banned. For instance, shadow banned comments posted to a blog or media website will not be visible to other users accessing the site, right? So you could say, oh, we're not actually censoring, because if you really dug down hard, you could find these things. but the nature of these algorithms and stuff might be such that basically they suppress anybody from organic traffic, like being able to see the actual most popular comment. They might boost up 10 other officially approved comments, and they won't outright ban that other comment, but they'll put the person that made that comment on a naughty list, and they'll make it so their comment basically doesn't get viewed, except for by people who are really trying to do a deep dive. Something like that. Alright, that's cool. So we did some live coding on the stream. We talked about algorithms, search engine optimization. Looks like we don't have any further comments in the chat so far. So I still got a lot of stuff to talk about. I'll just keep on going. And feel free to drop by a note if you've got anything to say. Otherwise, let us continue based on the title of our topic here. Okay, so we talked about algorithms. Now let's talk about subcultures. So the way that artificial intelligence and stuff relates to subcultures, I think the main reason is that subcultures conveniently label people. So if you identify with some easy category that Google or whoever could search, then that's actually very convenient because they could easily boost you or demote you. So I'll say subculture. It's a kind of self-labeling. It's just like if you consciously choose to use some kind of hashtag. So for obvious reasons, this is very convenient from an administrative standpoint, because it's like I didn't even have to label you myself. In fact, you actually labeled yourself and put you into a community, a grouping, something like that. And yeah, so there's all sorts of ways in which we might self-identify in the internet. Like last time I used Python as an example. So I'm just going to search the word Python community. What am I going to find? So, Python's community vast, diverse, aims to grow. Python is open. Okay, and then there's all these places in which you could label yourself as a person who uses and enjoys Python, and you have successfully labeled yourself in those circles. So now if you get charged for a cybercrime or something, then they'll be like, oh, we see that you've been around some Python circles. You must be tech literate and know how to program. In fact, it seems like you're friends with a known cyber criminal. Something like that. So I'm using Python as an example of a subculture. I'm sure there's a lot better examples, but Python programmer or something. Naturally, it's a label around which people could gather. Okay, so with that being said, let us turn to this text that we were looking at. The Melancholy of Subculture Society on this gwern.net. So I started reading this yesterday. Check out yesterday's stream if you're interested in starting from the beginning. I'm just going to continue. Just to summarize some stuff, I'll just go down. So it's talking about how a lot of the internet technology, digital technology, it's encouraged people to do a lot of solo activities. For example, you could just sit in your room and master Super Mario Brothers by yourself, whereas in the past, let's just say you like to do sailing, or you liked event organizing. A lot of these activities, they're more inherently social, but what a lot of stuff with internet, electronic, digital technology allowed people to do was to have a lot more of these solo activities, and this, you could say, also led to subcultures where people could gather around very specific niches of technology. And then this author also talked about how Japanese people specifically are kind of like a prediction of 5-10 years ahead, something like that, of what cultural developments might follow in the West. And right, so now this essay we're going to be talking about. So, let's assume you sleep for 8 hours. So what are they doing with their 16 waking hours a day? All right, what are the nerds up to? Let's do some reading. Okay. But it's better for us not to know the kinds of sacrifices the professional grade athlete has made to get so very good at one particular thing. The actual facts of the sacrifices repel us when we see them. Basketball geniuses who cannot read, sprinters who dope themselves, defensive tackles who shoot up with bovine hormones until they collapse or explode. We prefer not to consider closely the shockingly vapid and primitive comments uttered by athletes in post-contest interviews, or to consider what impoverishments in one's mental life would allow people actually to think the way great athletes seem to think. Note the way up-close and personal profiles of professional athletes strain so hard to find evidence of a rounded human life outside interests and activities, values beyond the sport. We ignore what's obvious, that most of this straining is farce. It's farce because the realities of top-level athletes today require an early and total commitment to one area of excellence, an aesthetic focus, a consumption of almost all other features of human life to one chosen talent and pursuit, a consent to live in a world that, like a child's world, is very small. Tennis player Michael Joyce is, in other words, a complete man, though in a grotesquely limited way. Already for Joyce at 22, it's too late for anything else. He's invested too much, is in too deep. I think he's both lucky and unlucky. He will say he is happy and mean it, wish him well. And this was written by David Foster Wallace in, I think it's the article, The String Theory. Okay, so we have this introductory quote. It's talking about people who become obsessive about something, and they do that thing to get to the high level of like the celebrity status, to be the top of their field in a winner-take-all field, like a professional athlete. Most people that play basketball are not going to become a professional basketball player, but the people that do, they put in all these hours. Eventually, they will. I guess they'll be paid to sustain that position for a while. All right, continuing. They're not preoccupied with our culture. They're participating in their own subculture. It's the natural progression of the otaku. So they're using this Japanese word to talk about people who are obsessed with something. So otaku, it's associated with a lot of times like nerds. People obsessed with some kind of fandom. They really like some anime or manga, or maybe some art or something associated with it. Like there's people that are cosplayers. They might spend all their time making costumes that look like characters in some show, and then they'll go to events and they'll sell these costumes. So there's all sorts of capacities in which a person might be this thing, but the main thing is that they devote themselves and they obsess to something which, if you're like, do they have a good, well-rounded life? The clear answer would be, well, it seems not. They're clearly obsessed with the thing. All right, they're fighting on Azeroth. I think that's like the World of Warcraft world. Are fiercely pursuing their doujinshi career. It's like, okay, self-published words, quote-unquote career. So it's drawing attention to the fact that a lot of the otaku, these nerd geek people, they aren't approved of by society at large. Rather, they're doing this thing and they might barely be scraping by. But it's a career in the sense that is very all-consuming, just like somebody who might want to become a lawyer or a doctor or something. They might be devoting all their finances, all their life to this particular thing. Or there are many subcultures linked and united by the internet for good and ill. For every charitable or benevolent subculture, such as free software, there is one of mixed benefit, an example, World of Warcraft, and one outright harmful, for example, fans of eating disorders and CP. The point the critic wants to make is that life is short and a zero-sum game. Alright, so that's kind of like Darwinian survival of the fittest outlook on life we're seeing here. You lose a third of the day to sleep, another third to making a living, and now you've little left. To be really productive, you can't divide your energies across multiple cultures. You can't be truly successful in mainstream culture and at the same time be able to devote enough effort in the field of, say, mechanical models. Okay, so that's giant robot models. To be called an otaking, not an otaku, an otaking, a king of the otaku. Otaku no o. Okay. A straddler takes onto his head the overhead of learning and participating in both and receives no benefits. He will suffer socially in the esteem of the normals and will be able to achieve little in his hobby due to lack of time and desire not to go overboard. The otaku and hikikomori recognize this dilemma and he chooses to reject normal life. He rejects life in the larger culture for his subculture. It's a simple matter of comparative advantage. It's easier to be a big fish in a small pond than a larger one. Okay, so this couple paragraphs here is pretty interesting. It's talking about, I can't win in mainstream society, but I can win in this little circle. I can get ahead in this little niche, and I'm gonna go big rather than go home and kind of dabble. So this is talking about why would somebody plunge in and identify with and become the leader of some kind of, or not even a leader, like a recognized, respected person within some subculture. And one of the answers is because within that little niche they could win. So let me just really quick relate that to the title of the stream. What is an algorithm anyway? Subcultures, digital governance, and you. So if you have somebody that has decided to take this plunge, so to speak, to become an otaking, not just an otaku, but the otaku no o, the king of the otaku, they have basically given themselves over to a particular niche. And I'll relate this to search engine optimization. So there's like keywords or different things, you could search various topics, and there will be people that are the leaders of like search results for a particular thing. There's some areas where you are very likely you will not succeed. So for example, if me, Alan, right, I tried to become the top NBA commentator, would that work? No, I don't really know anything about the NBA. It wouldn't. There's people that are naturally a lot more interested in that. They could talk about it, much more entertaining. Maybe they were even like NBA players themselves. These people, they would be able to rise in that, but I can't. So, it's like, oh no, like I can't beat these people. How do I rise to the top? So one way to do it would be like you carve out a niche and you find something, so some like someone's manga or anime that maybe it's not even that popular, and if I chose to become the foremost expert on this little really small fandom, and I applied all my energy and talent in order to market or grow that thing, then lo and behold, right, I could rise to the top of the algorithm. I could be a ruler of like this little niche on the internet, and then other people might also come and join this community too, like a smaller subculture, because then in this little artificially created world, then they could also enjoy these benefits of prestige and stuff. So this goes into this idea of like subculture as being a kind of technology-driven community. Now we have these communities where someone might become really comfortable with just some random like fandom for some fictional universe. Why? Because in that little world, they were finally able to meet people on the internet and make some friends, have some conversations that they wouldn't be able to do with something more mainstream. Like, I don't know, you go to a basketball game. If you're not if you're a nerd, you're not an extremely sociable person. I don't know. Maybe you'll have a hard time meeting people. But you read some like if you went and you read fiction online. So I don't really read fiction very often. I've read like a bunch of classic books, but I don't really read like stuff people have wrote recently. But let's just say I went online and I'm searching for, who are the people that are trying to write novels, and then I pick like some super specific niche, like cyberpunk fantasy with set in China with utopian elements. I don't know, something like that. Then very quickly I might actually make a lot of connections and be able to become significant in this little subculture, just because of the fact that it's such a small subculture, right? Like if you send I haven't done it, right, but if I sent like an email and I've to somebody who wrote a novel or something, there's a lot of people trying to write stuff that basically they don't really have very many readers. I will say, like in the past, for example, I've had people reach out to me. Like one guy wrote a novel and he actually asked me to review his novel. So I read his novel and I gave him a review. It's just like, it's not that big of a world. I know this guy, he had actually published his book online in some places. So he successfully wrote a novel, probably published on Amazon or something. And I read a free PDF and I wrote him a review. Probably didn't reach out to me further because I didn't give him 5 stars, but wrote an honest review. That's what we're doing here. Okay, let's look at the next section of this, checking comments. Nope, it doesn't look like new comments, so we'll just continue. Oh, so it looks like we're gonna get some naughty words coming up. So just warning, I'm not gonna read or promote anything lewd here, but it might show up on the screen. So just warning there. Okay, have you ever woken up from a dream that was so much more pleasant than real life that you wish you could fall back to sleep and return to the dream? For some, World of Warcraft is like a dream they don't have to wake up from, a world better than the real world because their efforts are actually rewarded. Okay, so by actually rewarded here, this will tie in with a lot of science, popular science type stuff. So I think it's pretty common that people talk about like dopamine. Just talking to various people. This is no longer like specialized technical language. Right, like here I have this article, healthline.com, and we have the heading, and it says 10 best ways to increase dopamine levels naturally. So why would a headline like that be able to catch people's attention? Well, clearly people, they want more of this dopamine stuff, and they want it to be gotten naturally so that they don't have to buy a product to stimulate it or whatever. It's like, I want the happy brain chemicals, basically. So there's suggestions: eat lots of protein, eat less saturated fat, consume probiotics, eat velvet beans, alright, exercise often, get enough sleep, listen to music, meditate, get enough sunlight, okay, consider supplements. So, whatever that means, the point is that stuff like dopamine, this brain chemistry stuff, very popular and mainstream now. So when people say stuff like are actually rewarded, that might not even mean you get like paid, like money for somebody. What actually rewarded could mean is, with the chemicals and brain pathways and stuff, I get a true experience of success. That's another sort of buzzword. People will be like, oh yeah, I'm not into things, I'm into experiences. So what is this about? Oh, well, I have another buzzword. I have mindfulness. Mindfulness. So, yeah. Let's look at this WAPO article. The inspired life. You're missing out on your experiences. A meditation expert explains how to live in the moment. So, Sharon Salzberg. Some Buddha statues in the background. Let's just look at the first question. Okay. Mindfulness seems to be all the rage right now, but why do it? Why meditate? Why be mindful? What does that do for us? Oh, let me just quickly link this in with another topic that's been running throughout this stream. So in the Sam Harris podcast, he's a big proponent of this meditation stuff, this mindfulness meditation. This is how I learned about this stuff. I listened to him talk about the popular neuroscience type stuff, and he talked about this meditation stuff, and I practiced some of this meditation stuff. I could talk later about why I don't do any of that stuff anymore, but yeah, he actually has a meditation app. Sam Harris, the guy we were talking about, who's warning about AI takeover and all that. So interesting connections here. We'll talk about how it's all related. But first, let's hear what Sharon Salzberg has to say. She says, mindfulness has a lot of benefits. One is simply connecting with their lives as we live them. If you drink your coffee while reading your paper and checking your emails with the TV on, that can lead to you feeling perpetually disconnected and unfulfilled. You may think you need to get different coffee or grind it differently, and that would make you feel more satisfied, instead of realizing maybe the first step is really actually inhabiting our life and really connecting to it every once in a while. Sometimes just drink the cup of coffee and experience it fully. Alright? Mindfulness is simply the perception of what's fully happening in the moment, not distorted by biases. Ooh, so that goes, we were talking about cognitive biases, rationality, and all that stuff. Check out the previous streams. If anybody makes a comment with that, I could talk more about that, but otherwise I'll just assume you know where to look to learn more about that. See, plain old stories, usually that have something to do with regret, over and over and over, or anticipating future events that most likely will never happen. So if you're in the present but you're thinking about the past or the future, then you're not utilizing the current moment. Rather, these things that are literally beyond your reach because they're in the future or the past, they might be bothering you. So she says, mindfulness helps relieve anxiety and can give us a real sense of connection and fulfillment, as well as insight and understanding. The idea is, by developing a different relationship with our experience, we get to see it differently. If an emotion comes up and we start fighting it, there's not a lot of learning going on. If we fall into it and become overwhelmed, there's not a lot of learning going on. Mindfulness helps us develop different, kinder relationships with ourselves to see much more deeply into all of our experience. Yeah, so in the sense of not being anxious or reliving the past, and instead paying attention to the moment, I don't think that sounds like an inherently bad idea. I'll say that in like Christian thought, you aren't supposed to be trapped in your thought and stuff because about the past or the future. You aren't supposed to be anxious, and then you aren't supposed to be strapped down by the past such that you aren't doing what you should be doing in the present. So these good ideas of mindfulness or whatever, they're by no means an endorsement of, oh yeah, Sam Harris said one thing that's kind of correct, so I therefore support what Sam Harris has to teach about the brain. All sorts of different people might say things so they're useful or correct. And that's part of the reason why on this stream we continue to read and look at and hear from all sorts of different sources, not saying like, oh yeah, that guy's funded by George Soros, so I'm not going to listen to him. It's like, oh, let's actually hear what George Soros has to say. You know, he might have some interesting points to make, and learning from him might be useful for us. So we continue. So now they're talking about this game. Oh, we're back to the Melancholy of Subculture Society. I'm going to try to narrate what I'm also doing on the stream, understanding that a lot of people are only listening to the audio and not looking at the video. So trying to get better at that. So I'm looking back at the Melancholy of Subculture Society article, and I'm just mentioning this EVE Online, which is a, quote, space-based, persistent world, massively multi-online role-playing game. So it's just a huge game where you pretend to own a spaceship, and there's all sorts of politics and economic stuff that goes on. If someone's actually played that game, I'd be interested in them telling me about their experience, or if someone has a accessible article, feel free to send it my way. Alright, continuing. EVE Online is unique in gaming and that we have always played on the same massive server and the same online universe since May 2003 when it first went live. We not only understand the harsh penalties for failure, but also how longevity and persistence is rewarded with success. Longevity and persistence is rewarded with success. When you have over 60,000 people on weekends dealing, scheming, and shooting each other, it attracts a certain type of gamer. It's not a quick fix kind of game. We enjoy building things that last, be they virtual spaceships or real life friendships that together translate into massive empires and enduring legacies. Those of us who play understand that one man really can make a difference in our world. Yeah, so this seems like a pretty revealing quote of a person who's being introspective and saying, what is the value of this game? Why does this particular EVE Online game capture me versus other games? And they highlight some important stuff, which is persistence and longevity. So the hours you put in today, it's not like the game's over and it's reset. Rather, just like how, you know, you might invest money into a piece of property. You might literally build up the house that you live in, something like that. Then it's saying that EVE Online, it's like a digital alternative to that. But while it might seem that in the normal world, let's say you work a pretty low-paying job, it just seems like you aren't getting anywhere. You're just on a hamster wheel, just kind of stay alive. Then for a lot of people, when they go into a game world, then they might be able to see something different. That actually, when they put in more hours and more stuff, they're able to build up something, and they don't have that experience in other places. And that might really draw somebody in to continue building their thing and doubling down on that position. Relating that to algorithms and stuff too. It's just like you're developing a company, you invest in like becoming a socially known person on some internet forum, something like that. Then you could be recognized by the algorithm, you know, if you behave well, and you might be easy to find simply because you're an easy search term. I'll just bring up something funny. Friend Xia Li, I've talked about him a bunch of times on here, and he's come and visited the stream. But like one thing that's funny about him is, you know, he has this name. You probably don't know anybody else that goes by Xia, but he does. That's what he calls himself. And so you search his name, quite short, easy to type, and then lo and behold, he's going to come up at the top of all the search results. So he has successfully optimized being himself on the internet to a degree that nobody else could do. And in his own world of you search Xia Li, then he comes to the top. So it's like he didn't even have to join someone else's subculture. He successfully like made his own subculture. Pretty interesting. All right, continuing the essay, Melancholy of Subculture Society. Okay, as ever more opt out, so opting out of sort of mainstream common society, the larger culture is damaged. The culture begins to fragment back into pieces. The disconnect can be profound. An American anime geek has more in common with a Japanese anime geek who is of a different ethnicity, a different culture, a different religion, a different language, than he does with an American involved in the evangelical Christian subculture. There is essentially no common ground. Our two countrymen can't even agree on objective matters like governance or evolution. With enough of these gaps, where is American or French culture? Such cultural identities take centuries to coalesce. France did not speak French until the 1900s, as this book, The Discovery of France, recounts. And Han China is still digesting and assimilating its many minorities in outlying regions. America, of course, had it easy in starting with a small founder population which could just exterminate the natives. The national identity fragments under the assault of burgeoning subcultures. At least the critic beholds the natural endpoint of this process. The long nightmare of nationalism. Okay, I was thinking of mentioning this word nationalism. We'll talk about it in a bit. Falls like a weight from the minds of the living as the nation becomes some lines on a map, some laws to follow. No one particularly cares. The geek thinks, meh. Here, Canada, London, Japan, Singapore, as long as FedEx can reach me and there's a good internet connection, what's the difference? Nor are the technically inclined alone in this. Alright. You can test this yourself. Tell yourself, the country I live in now is the best country in the world for people like me. I would be terribly unhappy if I was exiled. If your mental replies go something like, what's so special about the USA? It's not particularly economically or politically free. It's not the only civilized English-speaking country. It's not the wealthiest, and so on. Then you are headed down the path of opting out. This is how the paradox works. The internet breaks the larger culture by letting members flee to smaller subcultures, and the critics think this is bad. They like the broader culture. They agree with Emil Durkheim about atomization and point to examples like South Korea, and deep down, furries and latex fetishists really bother them. They just plain don't like those deviants. Alright, bunch to unpack in this paragraph. So, when it's talking about a breakdown, the larger culture is damaged, that's to say, you can ask a question like, what does American culture mean to you? Something like that. If everybody is just fragmented into these subcultures, then suddenly it's not just living near and working with and being around the people near you that's a unifying factor. But if the main thing that, besides just making the money to support what you do, people are spending all of their energy and these engaging in these social circles online, then are they loyal? Like, what loyalty do they have to their country? What do they really need? So they're essentially like quarantined and fragmented. They put themselves in a little online box. I thought the mention of nationalism here was apt. One could say that a lot of the modern nation states that we have, so let's just search nation state. These were we could say a relatively recent invention. Let's see what Wikipedia has to say. Okay, so people talking about different definitions. Well, just so we could continue the conversation, let's just say like after the 18th century, 18th, 19th, 20th century, we began to see a lot of nation states. So before nation states, where were they? Or how did people organize themselves? What sort of other things did they have? So
here, I'll just read this paragraph. It says, a nation in the sense of common ethnicity may include a diaspora or refugees who live outside the nation state. Some nations of this sense, okay, scratch that. The point I was looking for is this word like ethnicity. So a state might be, people might have organized themselves primarily on ethnicity as like, okay, this is sort of like a big extended family. You have your nuclear family, and then there's other people that look and have similar customs to you, like how a family might have. And in that sense, an ethnicity would form a natural way of organizing people. So there are some states that are primarily one ethnicity. A famous example people talk about is like, Korea, South and North Korea, mostly Korean people, though you go to the bigger cities and there's more different people. Right, another alternative here, they list an empire, which is composed of many countries, possibly non-sovereign states and nations under a single monarch or ruling state government. So as opposed to a whole bunch of little sovereign nation states, right, you might have an empire which is centered around a single person. The empire, it's just like everybody has to listen to the emperor, and then this is a big... it's a way to organize that's distinct from a nation state, because you wouldn't say that all these nation states, they have their own sovereign governments, because everybody, they're centered with the empire. So I think, like, yeah, Romans and Greeks, you could find some famous examples of those. So the irony of the subculture thing is that what this author of Gwern.net calls the nightmare of nationalism. It's basically to say that nationalism, in the sense of trying to make all these different sovereign nations, in a way it has failed to get people to gravitate around some single shared culture. If you do that and you get too enthusiastic about it, you become like Mustache Man. And you don't want to be like Mustache Man, because he's the worst person in all of human history, right? So nationalism bad, then what are the alternatives? What happens? So the subculture analysis is to say that more so than geographic boundaries and ethnicity or these other things. So I bring up ethnicity because it's talking about Japanese and American like anime geek, more so than these physical characteristics that would traditionally be natural divisions by which people organize themselves. Then you have these subcultures that people gravitate around. And I guess you could call it, my thesis here is that this is very convenient for digital governments, because it involves people self-labeling, number one, and then number two, the platform or the nature, the form by which they organize themselves is this primarily digital internet based thing. So by boxing themselves in like a literal game, a game is centrally controlled a lot of the time. There's a central server that's necessary to play some game, and if the server goes down, or Facebook goes down or whatever, then the community is essentially temporarily shut down unless it goes back up. And I'm sure that we could find a lot of examples of communities that have formed around a video game, for instance, and then the video game loses funding, they can't pay for their servers, they get sued, like whatever might happen, and then suddenly the community is effectively destroyed because it's tied to this digital thing that has a very transitory existence. Right, so algorithms, subcultures, they go hand in hand in that subcultures might form based on decisions from the algorithm, right? Like you start to play a game, to search topics. What are the topics that you might explore? Well, digital policies will be an instrumental part in deciding what sort of things people look at, who they get in contact with, and they literally have the switches to like cut off communication channels if they want. Like if YouTube decides that my stream here is no good, and they ban me or block me or whatever, there's nothing I could really do about it. It's not my platform. It's not my world. So they could do that. And this is only possible with this digital stuff, with algorithms. Where on the other hand, if we're talking about just more traditional forms of organization, an example I gave in a previous stream was like, suppose you don't like the Burger King or whatever burger shop is down the street. If you actually wanted to shut them down or something, it would take like a really long time to actually do it. If like you're a health inspector even or something, it wouldn't be instantaneous. But the nature of the digital governance stuff is you could have all sorts of things happen really, really fast. Of course, you could have a community that pops up really fast. People that's like, wow, you share my interests. I didn't know there was other people like this. And people might connect really fast in that sense. But then also the rug could be pulled out under you equally as fast. Where it's like, oh, where was that cool site I used to go to? And then before you know it, it's gone. So, yes, the algorithm, it's this form of this digital governance. Algorithm gives rise to subcultures, because you look at how do people find and enter into subcultures to begin with, and how does that relate to us? Well, I think that like in this stream, my purpose here is, of course, to have a platform, a forum, whatever you want to call it, by which people could come and gather and talk about these topics that I think are interesting. I think you all think they're interesting, but also too, I want to have make the best use of YouTube or whatever platform we have while we still have it, and understand that all these things they could be quite transitory. But in the moment that we do have an opportunity, we do have a thing, what we could do is we could meet people, we could exchange contact information, and we could establish like robust ways to maintain the communication networks we have. So even if let's say you're obsessed with retro video games, and then like I'm kind of a nerd about, I don't know, foreign languages or something, so we don't have like a total subculture overlap, so to speak, but that doesn't matter to me. I want to hear about what you know about, and maybe you want to hear about what I know about, and we don't have to be subject to the algorithms and the policies, in the sense that if you have more than one way to communicate with people, you have more than one way to hold a network together that isn't just like, these people, I only know them because I meet up in this game or something. It's just like you might have a friend, and then you have their phone number, their email, their WhatsApp, whatever, because and you remember your friends. So you have all these ways to contact with your friend, regardless of the platform. A goal I have here is likewise. If we meet interesting people, see interesting stuff, then let us learn and be able to meet one another, and not just communicate through YouTube, unless that's what you want. Like if it's kind of like a coffee shop, the only business I have in a coffee shop is to walk in there, get a cup of coffee, and talk with whoever wants to be there. And of course, that's a completely fine, legitimate use of a coffee shop. But if people are able to make more friends and stuff, then one thing to ask is, okay, if you made a valuable connection, you have something, a network that you would like to persist. Oh, network persistence, right? You want it to persist beyond YouTube. How do you do that? And I think practically, often what that means is, you have robust communication channels. You know how to communicate with people in various ways. And then also, too, we understand that just like in real life, in the outside world, the law could change. Your friend might have to move their house, whatever might happen. You don't know what's going to happen. We have to not be utopian in our thinking. We look at a platform like YouTube, and it's understood. YouTube might change their digital governance policy. I might not be here tomorrow. I might last 10 years. Who knows what's going to happen. But if we know what to expect, then because we could see clearly what's going on, I think that's an advantage to everybody. All right, I have to read. Let's read one paragraph from Jacques Ellul, just to say we did. So eventually it'll be like, oh yeah, we have like 50 streams and we're only a third through the book. That'd be kind of funny. But little by little, we'll make it through. Unless we decide to quit. If people are like, I'm sick of hearing from that guy. Well, hey, yeah, that's cool. We could quit. We're under no obligation. But let's continue because I wrote it in the title description thing. Then I put myself under a little obligation. So let's take a look. All right, Jacques Ellul continues. When a civilization dies, it transmits to its heirs its material but not its spiritual apparatus. Tools, houses, and methods of manufacture live on, more or less reincarnated, are to be met with again. There may be a temporary material regression in periods of great destruction, but the lost ground is recovered as if a collective historical memory made possible the recovery of what had been lost several generations before. But magical techniques, rites, formulas, and sacrificial practices disappear irredeemably. Irremediably. They can't be remedied. The new civilization will fashion its own new stock of magic, which has little in common with the old, only a set of generalizations so broad as to mean nothing, and over hasty analogies create the belief that magical forms are perpetuated and renewed. Instead, they live on only in the minds of the initiates and not in any human or social reality. Consequently, a magic technique that is not passed on in time or space does not follow the same evolutionary curve as material technique. There is not a progression of discoveries built one upon the other. Rather, discoveries remain side by side and do not affect one another. Okay, so I'll just say of this, like, this sounds, we could think of, like, in a video game, there's techniques, there's powers, there's, ways you could win in a video game. Let's consider that magic, these techniques to win at some video game. Those things are kind of, they come up based on the video game. Like, every video game will have particular strategies and things to win that will be particular to that game. There might be general patterns that you see again and again, but, you take... League of Legends Season 3, then there were particular things in that game that you would do to win. So it sounds like what he's saying here about magic and how stuff is transmitted or lost, it relates directly to subcultures, and that we have seen like the rise and fall of various internet subcultures, and they would all have their own particular magic, like ways to win in video games and so on and so forth. But a lot of those have died. But still, we have the internet technology, the HTTP protocol. All of this still remains in the same way that it's talking about how, unless like a bomb drops or something, then you still have a lot of the material stuff in place. So with the internet, there's still giant undersea internet cables, even if a bunch of internet subcultures are no longer here. We continue. There's another factor in the regression of magical techniques, the problem of evidence. A material technique's choice is relatively simple. Since every technique is subordinate to its immediate result, it is only a question of choosing the one that produces the most satisfactory result, and in the material domain, that result can readily be seen. That one form of axe is superior to another is a judgment not beyond a normal man in spite of extreme difficulty primitive man experienced when faced with such a choice. But with magical techniques, the same certainty affords of evidence does not exist. Who can judge their relative efficiency? Yeah, so this is to say, like, we could judge, what which processor is faster than another processor. They call them benchmarks, right? Technology benchmark test. Technology benchmarking, right? Understand the performance and cost implications of developing new technologies. So there's ways in which we could directly compare like various hardware or software algorithms, stuff like that. But then you talk about like magical efficiency, like what games accomplish, what a subculture does, stuff like that. It's not measurable in the same way. All right. Magical efficiency is not always to be measured by a clear material result, such as making rainfall, but may have to do with some purely spiritual phenomenon or even the material phenomenon over a long period of time. Here matters are not clear, nor the choice easy. The difficulty becomes even more acute when we think about the uncertainty of the reasons for failure. Was the magical technique really inefficient, or was the one who used it incompetent? The common reaction is to blame the magician rather than the technique, and here again we see an element of immobility in magic. So yeah, magic knowledge, it doesn't build and accumulate in the same way as technology knowledge. Let's see, the two great streams of technique, which we have traced from their beginnings, evolved in completely different ways. In manual technique, we observe an increase and later a multiplication of discoveries, which based on the other. In magic, we see only endless new beginnings and fortunes of history, and its own inefficiency calls its procedures to question. Okay, so we have this, 50 pages or whatever. Jacques Ellul is talking about what is the meaning of technique, and now he divides technique into what he calls two great streams, manual technique and then more magical technique, whereas the manual technique, the knowledge kind of cumulatively builds. Today you could buy a power saw, and it'll be more advanced than a power saw 20 years ago because we could keep on building off the physical knowledge that we see. Whereas, what are the lessons we learned from the magic in EVE Online or something? This would be much more hard to quantify and to understand and to learn from. If we wanted to say, okay, what were the best aspects of EVE Online? And then let's say you and I are making a video game or trying to launch an internet subculture or something, then would we naturally be able to apply what we learned from EVE Online and translate that and make it in a new system? Or do we have to do, I think you called it like endless new beginnings, endless multiple, like just keep on discovering the magic within each thing? How does it work? So Jacques Ellul divides two different streams. All right. Continuing, explanation becomes even more difficult when we note that in the magical domain too, our own era has achieved an overwhelming superiority. Our magical techniques have become really effective. These techniques obviously must not be confused with religious life or anything of that kind. This is purely a social phenomenon, both in aim and in form. However, the two aspects of technique, although both are social, are sharply separated and would seem to have interacted very little anywhere. Okay, I'm not exactly sure. Too many general words here. So I'll stop here reading the Jacques Ellul book for now. It seems next time he's going to be talking about Greece and Orientals. So as a Oriental, I think I have license to talk about Orientals. That'll be fun. We could plan on continuing this book in the next stream. So I think today we have covered all the topics. Yeah, what is an algorithm anyway? Subcultures, digital governance, and you. We related subcultures back to algorithms and how they connect, and we also were able to read the Jacques Ellul book. So I think we've covered all our bases for this stream. We've been going for about 2 hours or so now, so it's been a adequately long stream. I thank everybody who took the time to come and join today. I'll take note that 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is not a particularly popular time maybe to do a stream, which is fine. Now that I've tried it, I have that data point. I just woke up and started working on some stuff and felt I had a lot to talk about today. So that's why I just jumped on and did it this early. He said, why wait? And yeah, while interaction was basically non-existent, this channel. I think it's been a good stream. We covered a lot of ground, and I'm looking forward to future streams. Thanks everyone who joined, and yeah, do the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thanks everybody for joining.